Chapter 305. Impossible? Patriarch Qing Mang's corporeal body was invincible. Other than a true land immortal, who else could have killed him? How could he have fallen? The witchcraft sect master struggled out of his shock. As a half-step earthly deity of the witchcraft sect, not only was his body invincible, but his techniques were also unfathomable. Even when he was besieged by several half-step earthly deities, he was still able to escape unscathed. How could such a rare powerhouse die just like that? Furthermore, there were 6 other half-step land immortals who had gone to Chang and City with Patriarch Qing Mang. With 7 half-step land immortals working together, who in the world could fight against them? The witchcraft sect master didn't believe it at all. If it wasn't for the fact that the messenger was a direct disciple of the witchcraft and had great talent, he would have been slapped to death. Sect master, this is true. I saw it with my own eyes. Patriarch Qing Mang's corporeal body was penetrated by a punch from the Empire of Tang, and his primordial spirit was destroyed. The witchcraft disciple's eyes were filled with extreme fear. When the witchcraft sect master saw this scene, he instantly fell silent. The fall of 7 half-step land immortals was definitely an earth-shattering event. No disciple would dare to lie to him. Furthermore, it was easy to confirm if the old ancestor had fallen. He just had to return to the sect and check if the old ancestor's life fire was extinguished. It couldn't be faked. The other sect masters had solemn expressions as they thought of the same thing. The Kuragenkyo sect master, in particular, had an extremely ugly expression. The Kuragenkyo's foundation was originally inferior to the other sections. They didn't even have a single land immortal, and they relied on first ancestor to support them. Now that he had fallen, it was a fatal blow to the Kuragenkyo. After today, regardless of what would happen to the other sects, the Kuragenkyo would definitely be in a miserable state. For so many years, the Kuragenkyo had acted recklessly and provoked countless enemies. If first ancestor was still around, these enemies could only hold it in no matter how unwilling they were. However, now that first ancestor had fallen, the Kuragenkyo sect leader shuddered at the thought. That legend from the Empire of Tang, could he really be a land immortal? The palace master of the Snow God Palace was silent for a long time before he finally spoke in a bitter voice. When the other sect masters heard this, their lips moved as if they wanted to say something, but nothing came out in the end. It didn't matter whether Su Qin was an earthly immortal or not. Witchcraft and Raytheon could barely accept the fall of 7 half-step earthly immortals, but the other major sects such as the Snow God Palace and Kuragenkyo had completely collapsed. Even the Daoist master of the Dao One sect was in disbelief. Initially, he thought that Su Qin would be able to survive the joint attack of the 7 half-step land immortals. Little did he expect that Su Qin would be able to kill the 7 half-step land immortals in Chang and City. Saving one's life and counterattacking were 2 completely different concepts. There were many reasons for the former. It could be because one had extremely powerful life-saving means, or because one sensed fear in time and dodged in advance. However, the latter was purely a clash of strength. The Daoist master of the Dao One sect knew that the 7 half-step land immortals had gone to Chang and City with the art of combined attack. With the art of combined attack, they could even fight against an earthly immortal. How could they die? Now, what should we do now? After a while, the sect master of the Medicine God sect braced himself and asked. The fall of the 7 half-step land immortals was an unprecedented blow to the major sections. Many major sects were even unable to recover from this setback. However, the most important thing now was what to do next. One had to know that the 7 half-step land immortals were dead, but Su Qin was still alive. If they did not come up with a plan as soon as possible, the Wanjian school would be a warning to the other major sections. The Kuragenkyo sect master suddenly looked at the witchcraft sect master and said in a deep voice, "Sect master, I heard that there is a supreme treasure that was passed down from the last vitality tide in the depths of the witchcraft sect. Why don't you try again with the power of the supreme treasure?" The so-called supreme treasure was a Dharma treasure left behind by a supreme expert. A supreme expert was an existence that surpassed the earthly immortals. Even during the heyday of the last vitality tide, there were not many supreme experts. Even the weakest supreme treasure was far more powerful than a Dharma treasure. Some supreme treasures even had spiritual intelligence and the ability to recover on their own. Supreme treasure? The witchcraft sect master's expression changed drastically. He shook his head without hesitation and said, "The supreme treasure is the foundation of the witchcraft sect. No one can activate the supreme treasure unless the sect is in a real crisis." The witchcraft sect master was telling the truth. Apart from the supreme experts, even an earthly immortal would find it difficult to control a supreme treasure. In a way, the supreme treasure had undergone a certain sublimation and possessed some of the characteristics of a living being. It was extremely incredible. At this moment, the Daoism sect master suddenly said, "I have a suggestion." Suddenly, all the sect masters looked at the Daoism sect master as if they had thought of something. They suddenly realized that among the major sects, the Daoism sect was the only one that had not attacked Su Qin. Apart from the Daoism sect, the Thousand Buddha Hall was also the same. However, the group of bald donkeys in the Thousand Buddha Hall had always acted differently from ordinary people. They could not figure out what was going on, but the Daoism sect was right under their noses. "Daoism sect master, what is it?" All the sect masters looked at the Daoism sect master with burning eyes. Although witchcraft and Raytheon were protected by supreme treasures, the supreme treasures could only protect the sect from destruction and would not take the initiative to kill the enemy. If Su Qin chose to block the door and not fight with the supreme treasures, the disciples of witchcraft and Raytheon would be killed one after another. Who could stop them? It's very simple. The Daoism sect master pondered for a while and said slowly, "If you surrender and go to Chang and city to ask for forgiveness, the legend of the Empire of Tang might spare you this time." As soon as the Daoism sect master said this, the sect masters looked at each other and their expressions changed again. Behind them stood the major sects that had thousands of years of history. If they chose to surrender and ask for forgiveness, wouldn't they be disregarding the reputation of the major sects? However, if they did not do so when Su Qin came to kill them, not to mention the reputation of the major sects, they might not even be able to survive. Chang'an City. After Su Qin collected the Dharma treasures left behind by the 7 half-step earthly immortals, he directly returned to the palace. Third brother. The Emperor of Tang and Su Yueyun immediately went to greet him. The old man Fei Yu and the Lao Dao cultivator of the Daoism sect also followed closely behind. "Third brother, are you okay?" Su Yueyun couldn't help but ask. Although she knew from the Lao Dao cultivator that Su Qin won, she was still a little worried. "I'm fine." Su Qin shook his head. Before returning to the palace, he had already retracted the Golden Crow divine body. Otherwise, the natural aura of the Golden Crow divine body would be unbearable even for a pinnacle legend like Fei Yu, let alone an ordinary person like the Emperor of Tang and Su Yueyun. "My lord." The old man Fei Yu, the Lao Dao cultivator of the Daoism sect, and the other legends bowed deeply to Su Qin. At this moment, in their eyes, Su Qin was really like an immortal god. After chatting with the Emperor of Tang and the others for a while, Su Qin turned around and left, returning to the majestic underground palace. The Emperor of Tang, on the other hand, returned to the Tai Chi Palace excitedly. The impact of the battle between Su Qin and the 7 half-step Earth Immortals was too great. After repeated explanations from the Lao Dao cultivator of the Daoism sect and the old man Fei Yu, the Emperor of Tang finally realized what kind of situation the Empire of Tang was going to face. After today, no major sects would dare to act presumptuously in the territory of the Empire of Tang. Inside the majestic underground palace, the 10,000 Spirit Buddha lamp emitted layers of Buddhist light, while the Wutu flag was inserted in the center of the palace. A huge amount of earth elemental energy faintly spread throughout the entire palace. Under the protection of the 10,000 Spirit Buddha lamp and the Wutu flag, the majestic palace's aura was restrained to the extreme. Even an earth immortal would overlook it if they were careless, let alone other living beings. Should I go to the major sects overseas and sign in at all the places where I can sign in? Su Qin sat cross-legged, silently thinking in his heart. After the fall of the 7 half-step Earth Immortals, the major sects overseas could no longer stop Su Qin. Therefore, Su Qin had the idea of going to the major sects' territories one by one to sign in. After all, the sign-in at the Myriad Sword Island last time allowed Su Qin to sign in a lot of good things. Among the major sects overseas, although the Wanjian school's inheritance was not the shortest, it was definitely not the longest. For example, major sects like witchcraft and Raytheon that had been passed down for tens of thousands of years would definitely not disappoint Su Qin. I'm not in a hurry now. I'll think about it after I enter the Earth Immortal state. After thinking for a moment, Su Qin gave up on this idea. Firstly, it was because Su Qin's current strength had reached a bottleneck. Before he entered the Earth Immortal state, it would be difficult for him to have a qualitative change. Under such circumstances, even if Su Qin really got something good from sign-in, he wouldn't be able to use it. Besides, the major sects overseas were there, and he couldn't run away. Su Qin could go there at any time, so there was no hurry at all. Secondly, major sects like witchcraft and Raytheon that had been passed down for tens of thousands of years might have other backup plans. If Su Qin rashly barged in, he might be at a disadvantage. Therefore, Su Qin's idea was to wait until he completely entered the Earth Immortal state and his strength had increased again. It wouldn't be too late to make a trip there with more confidence. Anyway, Su Qin was already at the threshold of the myth state. If it wasn't for the sake of being foolproof, he would have already started to break through to the Earth Immortal state. But even so, according to Su Qin's estimation, he would start to break through in a few months at most. With my current level of compatibility with the fire element vitality, once my primordial spirit fuses with the vitality sea, it will definitely be in the depths. At that time, after I enter the Earth Immortal state, the benefits I'll obtain will be even greater. Plus, with the golden crow divine body, Su Qin's eyes began to shine. As long as I successfully break through in terms of strength alone, I should be considered a powerhouse in the Earth Immortal state, not to mention the other trump cards. Su Qin calmed down, and his gaze suddenly became firm. Next, he was ready to break through with all his strength and strive to enter the Earth Immortal state in the shortest time possible. P.S. There's no update for tonight. Today's update was released during the day. Is it considered an early update? It's the end of the month. I'm begging for monthly votes. If I don't vote, the monthly votes will expire. Chapter 306. To ascend to Earth God Immortal, I need to fuse my Yuan spirit with the sea of vitality in the depths of the void, and slowly draw on its power to replenish my physical body. Su Qin's thoughts were in turmoil. Right now, all the shackles and bottlenecks of ascension to Earth God Immortal were as clear as the flip of a hand to him. Moreover, the most difficult thing for other pinnacle myths was to have their Yuan spirit traverse the void, lock onto the location of the sea of vitality, and successfully fuse with it. But for Su Qin, it was as if it did not exist. After all, Su Qin's physical body was the golden crow divine form, a favorite of fire-type Yuan Qi. He was born with the ability to sense the location of the sea of vitality, which was equivalent to carrying a miniature fire-type origin pool with him. With the golden crow divine form's ability to sense the sea of vitality, it would only take a thought for Su Qin to fuse his Yuan spirit with the sea of vitality, unless he was deliberately unwilling to look for it. According to the Wanjian school's records on ascending to Earth God, fusing one's Yuan spirit with the sea of vitality is a crucial step. But after that, using the power of the Yuan spirit to draw on the power of the sea of vitality to replenish the physical body is equally important. Su Qin lowered his gaze as his mind raced. As the legacy of Earth God Immortals, the Wanjian school naturally had records on how to ascend to Earth God Immortal. After Su Qin destroyed the Wanjian school, he had shrouded the entire Wanjian school with his divine mind, and after his Yuan spirit metamorphosed, he had used its power to cover every corner of the island and browsed through the countless tomes of the Wanjian school. That included these records. Fusing one's Yuan spirit with the sea of vitality, using its power to nourish one's Yuan spirit, and then drawing on the sea of vitality to replenish the physical body. It's a process that cannot be accomplished overnight, and must be done slowly. The 10,000 Swords Taoist of the Wanjian school had spent 10 years incessantly drawing the power of the Sea of Vitality into his physical body, and finally became a earth god immortal. Su Qin thought to himself. How vast was the power of the Sea of Vitality? That was a symbol of the convergence of all the vitality in the world. Even though Su Qin's gold crow divine body had already surpassed the ordinary Dharma body, if he was not careful, he would be instantly blown apart by the power of the ocean of vitality. Therefore, when drawing the power of the Sea of Vitality, one must be extremely careful. That was also the reason why very few people would survive if they failed to break through to the Earth God realm. Of course, most of the pinnacle mythics could not even draw the power of the Sea of Vitality to replenish their bodies. When they used their primordial spirits to search for the Sea of Vitality, most of them were already lost in the depths of the void. However, with my golden crow divine body's devouring speed of vitality, it will take far less than 10 years. If I'm slow, it will take at least 1 year. If I'm fast, I will be able to replenish it within a few months. A smile emerged on Su Qin's face. The 10,000 Swords Taoist had spent 10 years using the power of the Sea of Vitality to replenish his physical body because his body was too weak and the amount of vitality he could absorb was very limited. On the other hand, the amount of vitality Su Qin's golden crow divine body could absorb in a single day was equivalent to the 10,000 Swords Taoist's 1 month, or even several months. And that was with the golden crow divine body connecting with the Sea of Vitality and absorbing far more vitality than the 10,000 Swords Taoist. Otherwise, if the total amount was the same, Su Qin would only need a few days or dozens of days to make the leap from pinnacle mythic to earth god immortal. Even so, no matter how short the time needed to break through, there is no turning back once I choose to break through. Su Qin's expression turned solemn. During his breakthrough, Su Qin's primordial spirit would have to fuse with the Sea of Vitality and would not be able to interfere with the outside world. His physical body would have to endure the replenishment of the Sea of Vitality at all times, and would not be able to move at all. And if he chose to give up during that period and his primordial spirit forcibly returned to his physical body, not only would his breakthrough fail, he would also suffer the backlash of the entire Sea of Vitality. Even Su Qin's scalp felt numb at that price. While he had the immortal fruit, peach of immortality, that could heal all injuries, Su Qin could not guarantee that he would be able to swallow the peach of immortality in time under the backlash of the Sea of Vitality. That was why Su Qin would not be able to fight for months or even a year if he chose to break through. Let's see how deep my primordial spirit can fuse with the Sea of Vitality. Su Qin slowly closed his eyes. Su Qin's primordial spirit abruptly leaped out from the ancestral aperture between his brows and circled around the black, majestic hall before striding out and fusing with the void. The depths of the void were vast and boundless. The power of Su Qin's primordial spirit walked unhurriedly in the void. With the guidance of the golden crow divine body, Su Qin's primordial spirit had already locked onto the location of the Sea of Vitality after entering the depths of the void. He rushed in a certain direction without any hesitation. There was no sense of direction in the depths of the void, and there were terrifying turbulences everywhere. But how powerful was Su Qin's primordial spirit? Unless he encountered a rare void storm, ordinary turbulence would not be able to shake Su Qin at all. It seemed like a moment had passed. It seemed like a few hundred years had passed. At a certain moment, Su Qin's primordial spirit suddenly squeezed into a colorful world. This world was filled with endless heaven and earth essence qi, metal, wood, water, fire, earth, yin yang, thunder. This is the Sea of Vitality? Su Qin was slightly shocked. Even though he had already expected this scene, he was still shocked at this moment. The Sea of Vitality was too vast, and endless vitality filled every place. Su Qin even sensed that extremely far away, there was a certain attribute of vitality that had turned into a life form and was slowly wandering in the Sea of Vitality. Vitality life form. Su Qin's pupils shrank slightly. The so-called vitality life form was the gathering of endless vitality, and then after endless time, there was a slight possibility of forming a vitality life form. The vitality life form was innately close to the heaven and earth essence qi. Although it was still far from a supreme divine beast like the three-legged golden crow, it was still much stronger than other life forms. At least now, although Su Qin's golden crow divine body was known as the darling of fire attribute vitality, it was still inferior to a vitality life form. After all, the golden crow divine body was only a kind of constitution formed by the picture of the great sun, and naturally could not compare to the vitality life formed in the endless heaven and earth essence qi. Of course, if Su Qin cultivated the picture of the great sun, it would be a different story. After the picture of the great sun was completed, Su Qin would be able to transform into the three-legged golden crow. Even with Su Qin's strength, he could only transform into a three-legged golden crow cub, and in terms of life form, he was much stronger than the vitality life form. This is only the surface of the sea of vitality. If other pinnacle mythical stage primordial spirits found the sea of vitality, they would basically choose to fuse with it here. Su Qin's gaze kept sweeping across the vast sea of vitality. But I'm different. Su Qin chuckled, took a step forward, and began to walk toward the depths of the sea of vitality. Just as Su Qin began to explore the sea of vitality with his primordial spirit, the battle between Su Qin and the 7 half-step Earth Immortals spread like wildfire. In the overseas martial Dao world, the major sects were in a dominant position, overlooking all living beings like the heavens. However, the major sects were not the only major sects in the overseas martial Dao world. There were also countless itinerant martial artists and various sections. At this moment, when they heard that the 7 half-step Earth Immortals of the major sects had joined forces and died in the hands of Su Qin, they were all dumbfounded and in disbelief. That mythical stage god from the Empire of Tang is so powerful? Impossible? Don't tell me that the mythical stage god from the Empire of Tang has really become an Earth Immortal? That's right. With 7 half-step Earth Immortals joining forces, other than a real Earth Immortal, who can resist them? Countless itinerant martial artists could not believe it because the news was too absurd. No matter the era, the death of a half-step Earth Immortal was a big deal, let alone 7 of them in a row. Moreover, they had all died in the hands of the same person. However, as time passed, more and more such rumors were spreading. No matter how unbelievable the rumors were, many of the major sects remained silent. Such actions were tantamount to confirming this matter. Otherwise, with the arrogance of the major sects, how could they remain indifferent when they heard the news of their half-step Earth Immortal Patriarch's death? Not even the slightest reaction? All of a sudden, the overseas martial Dao world was in an uproar. Countless itinerant martial artists gloated. Many of the major sects were at the peak of the overseas martial Dao world and had monopolized most of the martial Dao resources. Countless itinerant martial artists had suffered under the major sections. Now that these high and mighty major sects had finally fallen, how could they sympathize with them? That mythical stage god from the Empire of Tang is too terrifying. I'm afraid only Lei Xuanzi from 300 years ago can compare to him, a level 5 mythical stage god side. As soon as he said that, everyone's expression changed slightly. Lei Xuanzi was the most terrifyingly talented disciple of the major sect Raytheon in the past 10,000 years. He was also known as the existence who was most likely to enter the Earth Immortal realm. It was said that when Lei Xuanzi was born, a sea of lightning descended. If it wasn't for a passing elder Raytheon who discovered it in time, Lei Xuanzi would have turned into dust in the sea of lightning. However, it seemed that it was because of this reason. Lei Xuanzi had an extraordinary understanding of the Thunder Dao. After joining Raytheon, relying on the martial Dao cultivation resources provided by Raytheon regardless of the cost, he had entered the peak of the mythical stage in less than 300 years. Moreover, he had formed his domain and primordial spirit. He even had the battle record of a half-step Earth Immortal. However, unfortunately, Lei Xuanzi, who was regarded as the greatest hope by Raytheon, had mysteriously disappeared 300 years ago and never appeared again. Lei Xuanzi. How can Lei Xuanzi be compared to the mythical stage god of the Empire of Tang? A mythical stage god immediately retorted, Lei Xuanzi's strongest battle record is that he fought a half-step Earth Immortal. However, the mythical stage god of the Empire of Tang killed 7 half-step Earth Immortals in a row not long ago. How can the two be compared? But if Lei Xuanzi is still alive now, he must have entered the Earth Immortal realm and is qualified to be on par with the mythical stage god of the Empire of Tang. Is it that easy to break through the Earth Immortal realm? Just as many overseas martial artists were arguing endlessly. Su Qin sat cross-legged in the majestic black hall under Xianxia City. His primordial spirit was deep in the vast sea of vitality. Have I reached my limit? Su Qin's primordial spirit suddenly stopped and looked around. Chapter 307. Primordial Qi Ocean. It was so vast that one could not see the end of it. In this place, there were almost no traces of other living creatures other than the primordial Qi life. Only the primordial Qi life could survive in such an extreme environment. At this moment, in the depths of the primordial Qi ocean, Su Qin's primordial spirit suddenly stopped. This place is probably close to the bottom of the primordial Qi ocean, right? Su Qin glanced around. If the surface of the primordial Qi ocean was a colorful world with many primordial Qi mixed together, then, after going deep into the primordial Qi ocean, one would find that all the primordial Qi, such as metal, wood, water, fire, earth, yin, yang, thunder, and so on, began to become orderly and distinct. But now, the primordial Qi in front of Su Qin began to slowly merge, forming a gray gas that slowly floated. I can't go any deeper. Su Qin was extremely cautious. Although the gray gas far exceeded any kind of primordial Qi in terms of energy intensity, it gave Su Qin an extremely dangerous feeling. When a peak mythical creature broke through to an Earth Immortal, the essence was to integrate the primordial spirit into the primordial Qi ocean, and then borrow the power of the primordial Qi ocean to nourish the primordial spirit and replenish the body. And the power represented by the primordial Qi ocean was completely different from the surface to the depths. Generally speaking, the closer one was to the primordial Qi ocean, the purer the power would be. If a peak mythical creature used this to nourish the body, the greater the benefits would be. But the prerequisite for obtaining benefits was that one could bear the benefits. For example, in Su Qin's current position, the primordial Qi of heaven and earth had begun to faintly merge into one, forming a brand new power. If the primordial spirit of other peak mythical creatures went deep into this place and drew the primordial Qi here to replenish the body, their body would probably explode immediately. Going too far was as bad as not going far enough. A peak mythical creature who had lost his body, no matter how powerful his primordial spirit was, it was impossible for him to become an Earth Immortal. Moreover, without a body as a coordinate, the primordial spirit would probably not be able to return to the human world. It could only be trapped in the primordial Qi ocean until the primordial spirit collapsed. This was also the reason why other peak mythical creatures chose to fuse only on the surface of the primordial Qi ocean, because they could not bear the power of the primordial Qi ocean at all. Of course, Su Qin was different. Su Qin's body was the Golden Crow divine body, which was superior to ordinary Dharma bodies. Moreover, he was born with the control of fire element Yuan Qi, which was equivalent to half a Yuan Qi life form. With the Golden Crow divine body as the foundation, it was no problem for him to contain the power of the deep Yuan Qi ocean. Moreover, the Golden Crow divine body was too strong. It had already surpassed ordinary Dharma bodies even before it was replenished by the vital Qi Si. The power of the vital Qi Si on the surface was unable to improve the Golden Crow divine body at all. However, no matter how strong the Golden Crow divine body was, it could only contain fire Yuan Qi. But at this moment, if Su Qin went deeper, the Yuan Qi of heaven and earth would start to fuse together. The fusion here was not the kind of mixture on the surface, but a complete fusion. And Su Qin's current position was at the critical point where the Yuan Qi began to fuse. If he took another step forward, the energy of the Yuan Qi Si would begin to fuse completely. If I had completely mastered the picture of the Great Sun, I could have tried to take it a step further. I could have the body of the three-legged golden crow as the strongest divine beast and forcefully combine all of the vitality chi together. But now, I think I should forget about it. Su Qin shook his head slightly. However, although he could not take another step forward, Su Qin was already very satisfied. At this moment, he was already in the depths of the vital chi sea and was only a step away from the real bottom. If Su Qin chose to fuse here and step into the Earth Immortal realm, the benefits he would obtain would definitely far surpass any Earth Immortal of any era. This is it. But before I break through, there's still something I need to do. With a thought, Su Qin's primordial spirit began to leave the vital chi sea, crossing layers of the void and returning to his physical body. Just now, Su Qin only went deep into the vital chi sea with his primordial spirit and did not choose to fuse to break through to the Earth Immortal realm. That was why he could leave and return at any time. Once I choose to break through, I won't be able to do anything for at least a few months. During this time, if anything happens, Su Qin narrowed his eyes. Although the black towering hall he was in was underground and had Dharma treasures such as the million-spirit Buddha lamp and Wutu flag to conceal his aura, logically speaking, no one should have discovered him. But it was better to be safe than sorry. What if someone really broke in while Su Qin was in seclusion? As for the guardian formation, no matter what kind of formation it was, without the master of the formation, its power would inevitably be reduced. It would not be a problem to deal with those who were not as strong as Su Qin, but if it encountered a powerhouse of the same level, the formation might be broken. On Immortal Abode Island, the Heaven and Earth formation left behind by Lord Donghai, who was a peak Earth Immortal, was easily broken by Su Qin. Of course, too much time had passed, and the Heaven and Earth formation had begun to decline, and its power was less than 100%, but it was also because of the loss of the master of the formation. Therefore, if Su Qin wanted to break through without any worries, he must find a trustworthy person to guard him. Thinking of this, Su Qin turned his gaze and looked at the black entrance not far away. This entrance was the passage connecting the human world and the underground cave world. Thousands of years ago, countless demons of the cave world had invaded the human world through this entrance. However, when the demons of the cave world found that the vitality of the human world had fallen silent, and all the laws had withered, they retreated. For the cave world, only when the human world was at the peak of the recovery of vitality would it have the significance of invading. Otherwise, at other times, the environment of the human world was not as good as the cave world. Moreover, the vitality of the human world was like poison to most demons, so what was there to invade? After a while, under Su Qin's gaze, a figure in black walked out of the entrance. This figure had a cold expression, but it had the same appearance as Su Qin. Except for the difference in temperament, it was almost exactly the same as Su Qin. It was the incarnation that Su Qin had sent to the cave world to sign in everywhere. This incarnation was barely formed by Su Qin's flesh and blood rebirth and the division of nearly half of his primordial spirit. The incarnation and Su Qin shared the same consciousness. Strictly speaking, the incarnation was Su Qin, but the body was different. And Su Qin planned to let the incarnation ensure that he would not be disturbed when he was breaking through to the Earth Immortal realm. At the same time, he would also guard Chang, and city and intimidate all demons and monsters. His strength is a little weak. Su Qin frowned slightly and carefully looked at the incarnation. After staying in the cave for decades, in addition to signing in every day, this incarnation had also improved its strength. Now, it had already transformed into a primordial spirit and was not weaker than a half-step Earth Immortal. This kind of strength in the human world was definitely the peak powerhouse. As long as the Earth Immortals did not appear, it symbolized invincibility. Even in the cave world with countless powerhouses, it was a peerless demon comparable to the Demon Flower Domain Lord. It could overlook a domain and even have the opportunity to meet the demon god. But in Su Qin's words, it was indeed a little weak. If Su Qin's idea was spread out, it would probably make a group of old farts vomit blood. If a half-step Earth Immortal was weak, then what were they? They didn't even have the qualifications to be weak. However, no matter what the outside world thought, in Su Qin's eyes, A half-step Earth immortal was indeed weak. After reaching the initial level of the Great Sun painting and condensing the Golden Crow divine body, although Su Qin was not an Earth immortal, his combat strength and means were not weaker than a real Earth immortal. He was fully qualified to say that a half-step Earth immortal was weak. It's mainly because of the Great Sun painting. Su Qin sighed softly and thought silently in his heart. The Great Sun painting was not a divine ability, but a supreme cultivation method. To cultivate the Great Sun painting, one would need a mountain of fire element martial arts resources. Therefore, even if the incarnation mastered the cultivation method of the Great Sun painting, without enough resources, it could not even reach the initial level of the cultivation of the Great Sun painting. But I can temporarily increase the realm of the Great Sun painting with the blood essence. Su Qin's mind moved, and the Golden Crow divine body immediately unfolded. A terrifying aura filled the entire black towering hall, as if there was a real three-legged golden crow roaring. At this moment, Su Qin raised his right hand and several drops of dark red blood essence were forced out and floated in front of Su Qin. These drops of blood essence were the Golden Crow divine blood that Su Qin took out in the state of the Golden Crow divine body. With these drops of blood essence, the incarnation could improve its physical body to the level of the Golden Crow divine body in a short time. Of course, the reason why the incarnation could do so was because the incarnation was originally derived from Su Qin's flesh and blood. Coupled with the fact that they shared the same consciousness and were familiar with the Golden Crow divine body, it could barely achieve this. Otherwise, if it were other experts, they would definitely explode from the Golden Crow divine blood and their essence spirit would be annihilated by the terrifying aura in the divine blood. Just as Su Qin was about to enter seclusion to break through to the Earth immortal stage, Xianxia and City was bustling with noise and excitement. Countless overseas mythical martial artists poured in and looked around Xianxia and City in awe. Since Su Qin killed 7 half-step Earth immortals, the entire overseas martial arts world was completely shocked. Many overseas mythical martial artists carefully entered Xianxia and City as if they were on a pilgrimage. Imperial Palace. Many ministers had a headache. So many mythical martial artists suddenly appeared in Xianxia and City in a short time, and some of them were even at the 4th or 5th heavenly layer. How could the ministers not have a headache? One must know that decades ago, not to mention legends, there were not many peak grade 1 great grandmasters. Now, a group of mythical martial artists suddenly appeared in Xianxia and City. If a conflict were to occur, the consequences would be unpredictable. One must know that mythical martial artists can communicate with heaven and earth. Their every move can cause great destruction. A group of mythical martial artists is enough to tear down most of Xianxia and City in a short time. Ministers, don't panic. With Third Brother here, those mythical martial artists will not dare to make trouble. The Emperor of Tang was not worried at all. I hope so. There were still some ministers who were worried. Suddenly, at this moment, the commander of the Forbidden Army hurried out of the Taiji Palace. Your Majesty! The commander of the Forbidden Army quickly reported. The Palace Master of the Snow God Palace, Sect Master of Raytheon, Sect Master of the Medicine God Sect, Sect Master of the Kuragenkyo, Sect Master of the Witchcraft. They are already outside. As soon as the Forbidden Army commander's words came out, the expressions of many ministers on the scene changed. Even the Emperor of Tang, who was quite confident, had a dignified expression. Whether it was the Snow God Palace, Raytheon, or Witchcraft, etc., they were all major sects. With so many palace masters present, it was hard to predict whether they were good or evil. What are they doing in Xianxia and City? The Emperor of Tang calmed down and looked at the Forbidden Army commander and asked. Their purpose is... The Forbidden Army commander looked at the Emperor of Tang cautiously, swallowed his saliva, and said, to ask for forgiveness from the Imperial Uncle. Chapter 308. In the Taiji Palace. All the civil and military officials were dumbfounded. They thought they had misheard. To the ministers, the arrival of the sect masters of the various major sects seemed like a form of coercion. However, they did not expect that the purpose of these sect masters was to ask for forgiveness. In fact, the ministers could not be blamed for thinking that way. Although they knew that Su Qin had fought with 7 half-step Earth Immortals not long ago, they did not know what it meant to have 7 half-step Earth Immortals. For example, when 2 countries were at war, who would come to ask for forgiveness when they saw that the situation was not good. Although the death of 7 half-step Earth Immortals would greatly damage the foundation of the various major sects, it was not like there was no way out. At least, the major sects with tens of thousands of years of history such as witchcraft and Raytheon had supreme treasures that could stop the Earth Immortals. Ask for forgiveness? Ask for forgiveness from the third brother? The Emperor of Tang was dumbfounded. It took him a while to react. Even if the Emperor of the Empire of Tang found it unbelievable that the sect masters would ask for forgiveness, as the Emperor of the Empire of Tang, his thoughts were naturally far beyond that of ordinary people. No matter how unbelievable it was, he quickly thought about how to deal with this matter. Let them in. The Emperor of Tang pondered for a moment and said, "The sect masters of the various major sects were very honorable. Now that they had taken the initiative to ask for forgiveness and were so humble, the Emperor of Tang could not pretend that he did not see them. Your Majesty, they said that without the Imperial Uncle's permission, they dare not enter the palace." The commander of the Forbidden Army braced himself and said, "In the overseas martial arts world, every expert had their own cave abode. Su Qin was in charge of the palace. In the eyes of the sect masters, the entire palace was Su Qin's cave abode. Without the permission of the cave abode's owner, any martial artist who dared to enter the cave abode without permission would cause the owner of the cave abode to be displeased. The owner of the cave abode might even kill them. Therefore, without Su Qin's clear statement, the sect masters would not dare to enter. They had even taken a great risk to come to Chang and city together. After all, strictly speaking, the entire Chang and city belonged to Su Qin's cave abode. It was just not the core. You don't dare to enter? The Emperor of Tang fell silent. At this moment, he realized more and more how terrifying Su Qin's deterrence was. Without saying anything, many sect masters came forward to beg for forgiveness. They didn't even dare to enter the imperial palace. The officials in the imperial court looked at each other in disbelief. Since the recovery of the vitality tide, the intelligence of the overseas martial arts world had been constantly transmitted to the Empire of Tang. In the eyes of these ministers, the major sects that dominated the overseas martial arts world were the undisputed overlords. But now, these overlords had already begun to crumble in the hearts of their subjects. Is third brother in the Eastern Palace? The Emperor of Tang hesitated for a moment and asked the commander of the Forbidden Army. Your Majesty, the Imperial Uncle is not in the Eastern Palace, the commander of the Forbidden Army said in a low voice. Third brother is not in the Eastern Palace. He must be in seclusion, the Emperor of Tang whispered to himself. In that case, there is no need to disturb third brother. I will go and meet these sect masters. The Emperor of Tang thought for a long time and made a decision. No matter what happened, unless it was really necessary, it must not affect Su Qin's cultivation. As for the matter of these sect masters asking for forgiveness, the Emperor of Tang wanted to see what they were planning. As you wish. The commander of the Forbidden Army respectfully retreated. At this time, outside the Imperial Palace, there were already many overseas martial artists. Most of these overseas martial artists had rushed over after hearing of Su Qin's fame after the recovery of the vitality tide. Some of them were also disciples of the major sections. But at this time, the arrival of many sect masters of the major sects in Chang and city and stopped outside the imperial palace immediately attracted the attention of almost all overseas martial artists. In order to show their sincerity, these sect masters of the major sects did not use any concealment secret arts and waited outside the imperial palace without any disguise. The palace master of the Snow God Palace? Sect Master Raytheon? The sect master of the witchcraft sect. Why are they here? Countless martial artists rushed over to watch and chatted. Although the sect masters of the major sects were not the strongest, Being able to become a sect master was already a symbol of the major sect's prestige. At this moment, these sect masters were gathered together, which obviously had a far-reaching impact. 7 half-step Earth immortals died in battle and the legend of the Empire of Tang dominated the world. These major sects know that they have no hope of resisting, so of course they are here to ask for forgiveness. A legend sneered and said, "Ask for forgiveness?" The legend of the Empire of Tang killed their half-step immortal patriarchs. Not only did these sect masters not seek revenge, but they also want to ask for forgiveness? A young martial artist couldn't help but ask in disbelief. The legend of the Empire of Tang? I'm afraid you're wrong. Now they should not be called the legend of the Empire of Tang, but Tangguitian, another old-age martial artist said with a glint in his eyes. As soon as these words came out, the scene fell into a dead silence. Celestial being, what was a celestial being? Earth immortals were able to become one with heaven and man, and they could draw the vast and endless vitality sea with a wave of their hand. Therefore, Earth immortals were also called celestials. The old-age martial artist called Su Qin a Tangguitian. Obviously, he believed that Su Qin had become an Earth immortal. In fact, when Su Qin killed 7 half-step Earth immortals in one fell swoop, countless people guessed that Su Qin had become an Earth immortal. However, guesses were just guesses after all. But now, the sect masters of the major sects came to ask for forgiveness, which was tantamount to confirming this guess. If Su Qin was not an Earth immortal, would the sect masters of the major sects be so humble and ask for forgiveness? Even these major sects thought that Su Qin was an Earth immortal, so who would dare to question it? An Earth immortal? There is finally another Earth immortal in the world. That's right, other than an Earth immortal, who else can make the major sects take the initiative to ask for forgiveness? This is the first celestial in nearly 1,000 years. What a pity! I originally thought that Lei Xuanzi from Raytheon would be able to reach this stage. Lei Xuanzi is right. Lei Xuanzi is indeed very likely to become an Earth immortal, but that's all. How can he be compared to a Tangguitian? Many martial artists were in awe, and even their voices were much softer, for fear of disturbing Su Qin. This was the power of an Earth immortal. He could suppress the world without taking a single step. Even major sects like the Witchcraft and Raytheon, which had been passed down from the previous era of vitality recovery, would tremble in the face of an Earth immortal. Although there was hope for a supreme treasure to block an Earth immortal, it was a dead object after all, and the consumption of activating the supreme treasure was simply like a mountain or a sea. If Su Qin really wanted to attack the Witchcraft and Raytheon, he didn't need to do anything. He only needed to release his aura and guard outside the mountain gate. In less than a few decades, the heritage of these major sects would be exhausted, and even their inheritance would be cut off. Of course, generally speaking, no Earth immortal would do this. Firstly, it was because the supreme treasure had the mark left behind by the supreme expert. Even if an Earth immortal obtained it, he wouldn't be able to use it. Secondly, an Earth immortal only lived for more than 1,000 years, so they wouldn't completely fall out with each other. Otherwise, when this Earth immortal passed away, the inheritance he left behind would probably also be counterattacked by other major sections. Just as countless martial artists were discussing spiritedly, the Emperor of Tang and many imperial guards came to the top of the palace wall and looked down at the many sect masters standing outside the palace. Greetings, the Emperor of Tang. Many sect masters glanced at the Emperor of Tang and bowed slightly. With their status, they didn't need to do this to a mere emperor of a dynasty. However, behind the Emperor of Tang stood Su Qin, the celestial being. How are you going to apologize? The Emperor of Tang didn't beat around the bush and asked bluntly. As soon as his words fell, many sect masters looked at each other. Finally, the Kuragenkyo sect master stood up and raised his right hand. Suddenly, 10 items such as bells, axes, swords, and other items floated up. The Kuragenkyo is willing to offer 10 inherited magic treasures to apologize to the celestial being. The Kuragenkyo sect master respectfully bowed to the depths of the palace. In an instant, the scene suddenly boiled over. 10 inherited magic treasures? The Kuragenkyo has been passed down for thousands of years, but the total number of inherited magic treasures they have is no more than 10, right? Now they are offering 10 at once? Is the Kuragenkyo crazy? Inherited magic treasures are not ordinary magic treasures. They can protect the sect and be passed down for thousands of generations. Not to mention 10, even 1 is a big price to pay. Many martial artists were dumbfounded and full of disbelief. If a peak myth could barely refine a magic treasure after exhausting all their efforts, then the so-called inherited magic treasure could only be left behind by the Earth Immortals. The Kuragenkyo's cultivation method was flawed and couldn't give birth to the existence of the Earth Immortals. If they wanted to get the inherited magic treasure, they could only exchange it with other great sects or plunder other martial artists. In this way, after thousands of years of accumulation, they could barely gather more than 10 inherited magic treasures. But now, just to apologize to Su Qin and offer 10 inherited magic treasures, it was simply drawing the blood of the Kuragenkyo, however. Before many martial artists could react, the medicine master of the Medicine God sect also stood up and said respectfully, "The Medicine God sect is willing to offer 10 elixirs to apologize to the celestial being." Elixirs? 10 more? Some myths' hands were trembling, and their minds were in a mess. Even in the previous era of vitality, elixirs were extremely precious, let alone in the current era of vitality. Ordinary peak myths might not even have seen a single elixir in their lives. I, Raytheon, am willing to offer a caddy of thunder origin stones to apologize to the celestial being. I, Witchcraft, am willing to offer. I, Snow God Palace, am willing to offer. Then, one after another, the sect masters of the great sects stood up and respectfully offered their treasures to Su Qin, asking for forgiveness. Just as the sect masters of the great sects were waiting uneasily, Su Qin suddenly appeared on the stargazing tower in a black robe. Here to ask for forgiveness? The black-robed Su Qin looked outside the palace, his expression indifferent. It's been a long time since I signed in at the palace. Su Qin glanced at the stargazing tower and said in his heart, "System, sign in." The next moment, a cold, mechanical voice sounded in Su Qin's ears. "Congratulations to the host for signing in successfully. You have received the Void Gourd. P.S. It's the last day. I'm looking for monthly votes. Welcome to Immortal Cultivation Audiobooks, your gateway to the mystical world of Xianxia. Dive into legendary tales of martial arts, spiritual growth, and immortal ascension. Here, we bring you full-length English audiobooks of the best Wuxia and Xianxia stories, from young prodigies to ancient sect wars. Perfect for fans of Against the Gods, Martial World, and tales of demons and gods.